Hello everyone, welcome to my channel, Tobelovedtreasures Treasures by Corrine. This is my first video, so I thought I would kick off with one of my passions, slow stitching. I'm following along with Roxy Creations and Roxy Creations by Sarah's project for the next 6 months, which is Roxy's Journal of Stitchery. So this is my journal so far, and being that I'm impatient, I've been charging along creating these pieces and just thoroughly loving it. So I thought I would take this opportunity to create a video and post it to my channel and start the process of becoming a YouTuber. So we'll see how this goes. It may be short-lived, it may be something, it may be nothing, but at least it's somewhere to record my work at least. So this is my journal. I have created the outside of the journal so far, and I've used a cookbook. So the cookbook was the perfect size for me because it was a little bit wider through the center, and if I measure it, is 8 inches by 10 inches. So perfect size for a piece of stitchery. My front piece, I've stitched in a rabbit, and the rabbit has come from a PDF file that I purchased off Etsy from Stitchesbyjulia. So it was only about $3.50 or $3.45 Australian, which gave me 2 sizes of rabbit, a little guy and then the big guy. So what I did was transfer him onto some calico using a light box, and then using my sewing machine, so technically not embroidered, I did a free flow stitching method. I just purchased a new sewing machine that allowed me to do this because you need to drop the feet down into the machine, and that allows you then to move your fabric just freely around to create the image. So this was my first attempt, and you can see if you look closely, I started at the ear and it went a little crazy, and then it shot down here and then it shot back in here and went crazy again, and then I finally sort of got control of it and completed the piece. But it is, you know, a little bit wonky, which I think adds to the charm of the little rabbit. So then once I'd stitched that onto a piece of calico, I then started embellishing it with some bits and pieces through the techniques of slow stitch. That panel then was applied to my front cover. So when I got the cookbook, I actually removed the spine, covered it in some hemp fabric that I purchased from Roxy Creations from Rachel. She has these fantastic fabric packs, which are just beautiful fabrics, and I'm in Australia, so a lot of these fabrics we don't see here, so it's lovely to have some pieces from Italy and France and from around the world. So thoroughly enjoyed covering my cover from my cookbook with some of those fabrics. Now as I turned over the hemp, I then used this piece of floral that I had to cover the inside. So before I did attach it, I did embellish this corner here with some embroidery. I even stitched some little circles just to sort of add a little detail to the piece, and stamp some numbers on some calico and attach that. Then some lace to create a pocket. I then, with my sewing machine, went around the outside to zigzag stitch to attach that lace, and then I glued it into position on the inside of the cookbook cover. So I got a nice hard cover ready to go. Now because I removed the spine, I decided to use the tab method. I'd never created the tab spine before that Rachel showcased on one of her videos, and it was fantastic. Really simple. So I've got these pieces across that I can then stitch my signatures into. So lovely way to present your book. That is in one of Rachel's videos. She's actually done it a few times on different journals, so you'd be well worth going across and having a little look at that. The only problem I think I'm going to have is I've got a 2-inch spine, and because I'm very textural with my work, my panels that I'm creating are very thick, so my book is filling up very fast, and technically I've only done one of the prompts, which is the bunny. So I've been busy doing other panels and my book is filling up fast. So I'll either remove the tabs and make them bigger or create another book. So the jury's out on that. Okay, let's have a little look inside. So this panel here, while everyone was doing their sampler, I decided just to do a free form, lots and bits and pieces onto a page, and then stitching it with all of the stitches that you were using within the sampler. So it was really good because I've done samplers before, so that sort of wasn't really interesting me, but it allowed me to use the stitches that you're all using throughout this piece. So I sort of pieced together random pieces of lace and a piece of fabric here that had some cut work, and then embellished it with some beads. This is a piece of fabric that had a floral print on it, and I just went over all of that with some stitches, added some pistol stitch, a key, just some random stitches everywhere. And that's a stamp where I just stamped the 15 cents on a piece of calico and stitched it on. So that is sort of my sampler. But then, of course, I couldn't contain myself because I'm just like a bull at a gate. So I started working on some other pieces. So this hummingbird, the image is from a fantastic book that is Embroidery Transfers. This is the actual book. And it's the best thing I've ever come across, because all the images are in there are designed for embroiderers. Well, beautiful work. Like, I could never do that. But what's in here are all of the images that they use to do their embroidery. So you can transfer these either with a transfer paper that you heat it and it transfers, or you can use a chalk transfer paper or a light box. But they're basically just fantastic designs ready to go. Now the hummingbird, he is, I think there, yeah, that's the little hummingbird. So fantastic for slow stitch, because there's all these little areas in the design that you can add beads and do different stitches. So highly recommend this book. Heaps and heaps of designs in there, and coming up you'll see another one that I'm starting to play with that come from this book as well. So I'll try and link this book below if anyone did want to go and check it out. Well worth it. So with my hummingbird, what I did was I used a embroidery doily that I found in an op shop that no one had actually completed. So I cut a section of it out. It was a table runner. It was quite a large one. And then tacked it down, then seed stitched it in position, and then I actually embroidered it. So once again, you guys were doing your samplers. So I kept referring back to those videos and doing some of the stitches, satin stitch and stem stitch, and adding little beads to create the piece. And then the flowers themselves, I really went to town with the beads and put a little piece of netting over the beads to sort of create that texture. The doily itself, Erin Art is the brand, had the word linen on the doily, and also that's the item number and the size. So I cut those little bits out and built it into the piece. Then I added lots of doilies. I'm a big fan of the crocheted doilies. I love crocheting myself, but I never do really fine work like this cloth. So whenever I pick up pieces at the op shop, I either keep them for my treasure box, or I cut the doily up into all of these medallions and then work them through pieces. And it's just beautiful to see all of these different stitches that people have used to create these doilies, and they're perfect for slow stitch to create some texture. Now my little bird, as you can see, is there's lots of segments to the hummingbird. So in each of those segments, once again, I went back to the sampler video and just applied some of the stitches that everyone was using to the different sections of the little bird. I'll lift that up so you can see it a little bit closer. And I started working with some ribbon as well. I haven't done a lot of ribbon embroidery, but it's a lot of fun. It is tricky, but take your time and just make sure you're very definite where you want to put your stitches, and it just adds a whole new element to your piece. That there is a pre-made satin bow that flower that I had. So that was a perfect spot for that. It's like the shoulder hinge to the bird's wing. So love how that came together. Now this second piece, I was still very keen to keep stitching. So Alfred come along. Now this little guy, he's actually come from a pattern book that I purchased from Mattock. She's a designer in Sydney that has all sorts of fantastic slow stitch projects on her website available that you can buy. And this was a PDF file that I purchased to actually make this quilt. And I don't think ever in a million years I'll get to make the quilt, but these little panels of Alfred the bird are fantastic. And what Lisa's done is she has each page or each block is a Alfred and some form of embroidery on pieces of fabric that have been put together to create the background for the block. So as you flip through each of the blocks, you'll have some suggestions for some flowers, and of course your Alfred would sit in the middle there. And at the back are all the bits to make your Alfred. So you get a couple different bodies, some tails, some wings. So you cut them out of your fabrics, piece them together. You can thumb through the pages to get some ideas of different ways of embroidering some florals. So I've done a few Alfreds, which are in frames around my studio, but I haven't yet done one just as a slow stitch piece. So this was a fantastic way of showcasing Alfred. So in this scenario, I added a wing to his tail and then a wing itself on his back. That's his little purple body, and then went to town on the stitching. Those there are some yo-yos or Suffolk puffs, and then a bit of turkey work in there. So once again, back to the sampler, and just picked different stitches that you were all using to embellish my Alfred. So I'll just lift that up a little bit closer, little beads. So really pleased with the way Alfred came together. Love the colours. That cream fabric behind the yo-yos, that's actually from a pillow slip. So that is machine embroidery that's been done somewhere in the world, and I just cut a piece out to create my base. Then I edged it with crochet doily once again, which, as you can see on this tablecloth, there's the edge there that has been left from having the medallions removed. So I used that, and then it was a little bit short, so I just popped in some linen, and then using some of the purples and blues, just did some slow stitching through here to sort of link it all together. So really happy with how Alfred came to be. I'll do another Alfred in another video in the future, just to have another play, because there's so much scope with Alfred. You can just, he's fantastic. Very simple, fantastic little design that can be used in so many ways. Okay, then being that I was still stitching away, I created my Dragonfly. Now this piece, he's same principle. I believe the stencil image I used is in the back pocket. So that's the Dragonfly I found in the Embroidery Transfer book. And all I did was just shorten his tail and redirect it a little bit so that it sort of fit with my design. Now I didn't embroider all of these little elements. I decided I wanted to do a bit of a layered lace look to this Dragonfly, and then a little bit of ribbon embroidery, some sequins are down his spine, and then just did some little stitches to create his tail, and then his underwing beaded and satin stitched. So that's how the Dragonfly came to be. The piece that's in behind him, this white panel with all this floral embroidery on, is actually from a pillow slip. So that's machine embroidery. It's not me. I wish I was that good, but it's not. It's actually from a pillow slip. And I've fussy cut it out and pinned it down and then stitched it in with lots of seed stitch. And then I've come back and embellished it to try and make it look like it was part of the whole picture. So I've created some little 3D flower clusters with little circles of fabric in the purple and the calico. Actually, I believe that is Alfred's fabric. and then a couple little beads in the green to secure it. I then added some basket weave, what they call that, hessian, in the green to sort of create some texture. Put some little stitches over everything, like little X's. Some more doilies. That there is a bow I just tied out of some seam binding. And then to give it a bit of texture, I did some fly stitch over it just to sort of make it, what's the word, mold all into one piece. It's like the more stitches you add, the more it becomes one complete piece. So never stop with your stitching, just keep adding, and it just gets better and better. Once I'd finished all that, this area around my dragonfly and even through underneath all of the floral treatment was still very plain. It just looked like this calico. So then I spent days doing seed stitch through those whole zones, and it just finished the piece. It really, like I was just saying, it married all the textures together. So I'll just lift that up and you can see all of those little seed stitches that I've put through the piece. It took forever, but that slow stitch is so worth it. Okay, so the technique I'm using to put my pieces into my book is I've basically cut myself a piece of calico, the width of the book, the height of the book, and then folded it in half. So my first panel is stitched onto here and here. There's the second and third, and then the fourth, which the girls have shown now how to attach your panels to your pages. My plan was to have then another piece of calico with another 4, but it's starting to get really thick. I think my next signature is still in that format. Yes, it is. So I've got one piece of calico, which would be 4 images, then a second piece underneath it, another 4, so 8, and I would have had another 8 there and another 8 at the back here, so it's just going to be too much, too big. So I think this will be removed to give it a bit of space, or I'll adjust my spine, so time will tell. This little piece here, I've just pinned it there because it's a little element I've made some time ago, and I just would like it to find a home in this book. I don't know where and how it will appear. I've got all sorts of little bits and bobs that are kicking around that I've cut it out. I just love it. Don't know where or when it'll turn up, but this, having your pages in your book already, is just a great space for popping little bits and pieces, so that when you come to do a piece, once you get our prompts, it might be something that works in with those prompts. So time will tell whether this signature stays. So the third signature is where my first prompt from Rachel and Sarah came in, and bunny. Once again, I couldn't believe it. Bunny on the front cover and a bunny on the inside. Oh, perfect. So once again, I used Julia's image, but this time, because I machine stitched the first bunny, I had the opportunity to hand stitch this guy, and I just couched him into position, which I believe Rachel did in her first panel too. She couched her rabbit into position, so it worked beautifully. The only thing I struggled was to trace the image, so I actually had to freehand this guy using my fabric pen because it was so spongy. I've used a piece of old quilt that I bought from someone in Europe, and I've been hoarding it, and finally I've gone, nah, it's just got to go into a book. No use hoarding these treasures. At least now it's somewhere where I can look at it and not hidden in a box somewhere in a cupboard. So Bunny reappeared. He's hand stitched, he's couched. Now this bow, my piece, I must admit, was going to be cream and gold, hence the braid here and the braid here and the background, and I kept all the laces very golden. So the whole piece was going to be, whatever happened here was going to be gold, because I had pinned the background. Then the bunny prompt come along, and around that same time I had this bow on my table. It was from a Christmas card, and when I took the Christmas card to the recycling bin at the end, the bow was there, and I'm like, oh, I can't throw that away. So I removed the bow, and the bow's been on my desk. So Bunny comes along, the bow then goes on to Bunny, which then sent me in a whole different direction, because this was going to be cream and gold, and due to that bow, all these burgundies started to come into position. So this piece was sort of not planned, and that's why I love slow stitching, because you just never know where your elements that you'd like to use will take you. So in this scenario, I wanted a single big flower to be a feature, and when I first started it, that there is like a hemp rope that you buy by the meter, and I stitched it down for the stem, created some leaves out of some fabrics, and then I had another one of these rosettes made out of satin ribbon, like the one that's on the Hummingbird further back, the purple one, but it was the wrong size. It just looked silly, and I sort of spent hours sorting all of that stitching out, then it just didn't look right. So I then came back to the piece and decided that I would get one of those medallions that I use all the time, for example these, and I ended up folding the medallion off center. That's cut away, pretend that it's not there, and then stitching it in under the flower to create a double layered petal, but off-centered. Then it still didn't look right, so I had this piece of trim across the top which came from a scarf, and there was a little bit left over, so I poked it inside, stitched it down, and it still didn't look right. I need something to break it up, so I ended up getting some twine, really fine twine that was on my table, and creating little clusters to add in behind that doily to give it some more texture. So stitch that all down, and it sort of helped balance the flower and make it in proportion to my piece. And then started embroidering all of the different flowers. Some of these are pre-made little flowers that were on a braid, so I've just stitched them into position, added some little loops and some beads. These little flowers here, it's actually sari silk. Once again, just had a little piece, cut off some little squares, and I sort of scrunched them into a tulipy sort of shape, and then just stitched them down. So that completed the bunny piece. Now the next piece I'm working on, which will be a video coming up, is going to be this owl. Now he's also from the embroidery book, and I've placed the pieces so that I'm liking so far and tacked them down, but that's as far as I've been. So I'm hoping I'll make a video in the future coming up soon of the owl and how I'm going to use him. So I've decided that the little guy wasn't big enough, so I enlarged him and chose the bigger owl and have sketched him into position. So I'm not sure how this piece will go, and I'll make a video of it, take you along for the journey so you can see sort of how I do some slow stitching on this guy. The owl is perfect for this because, as you can see there's plenty of space to pop beads in there, lace, some ribbon embroidery. That's, yeah, I just love these images. When I found this book, it was like a treasure trove of ideas for me. So in my back pocket, I slide all my little bits and pieces so that I have them as a record in there of my journey. And the owl will come along at some point and be stitched into my book. I look forward to next week because we'll be getting our next prompt from the girls, and we can continue working on our journal of stitchery. Okay everyone, thank you very much for watching, and once again welcome to my channel, and I look forward to posting some more videos of all the things that I get up to in my needlework journey and anything else that I play with. Okay, thank you everyone, and I'll see you all soon. Bye bye.